On a positive note, the Braves don't have to play another game in LA this postseason. You're watching Battery Power, Cory McCartney along with Graham McAuley, and Atlanta remains one win away from the World Series as it dropped Game 5 to the Dodgers 11-2 Thursday night behind Chris Taylor doing his Reggie Jackson impersonation with 3 home runs. Grant, the Dodgers offense woke up in a big way, and it started with the work they did against Max Fried. He had the best ERA since the All-Star break, including 2 previous starts this postseason with a 1.71 ERA dating back to July 17th and all. This just wasn't Fried's night, Grant, and his being off set the tone for this entire game.
It did. I mean, the Braves jumped out to that early lead. You thought, okay, maybe this is going to be it. You had Freddie Freeman hot again, delivering that 2-run homer, but that was really where the highlights ended for the Braves and where the Dodgers hit parade got started, particularly against Max Fried, and they continued against the Atlanta bullpen, and the Braves offense was kept under wraps, much like the Dodgers were in a bullpen game type situation. But I think the biggest takeaway on the Braves side of things has to be that you were hoping for a better start from Max Fried. There's just no two ways about that. I'm sure Fried was hoping for a better start, but a lot of hard contact. I know you're going to talk a little bit about that. And I think the Dodgers, they had a really good book on him, and they might have been writing that book as the game went along too. I think they'd figured out just ways to know what his tendencies and what his selections were going to be, and beating him to the spot time and time again. A lot of damage done on fastballs. And I mean, heck, every major league hitter is a fastball hitter, but it helps to really have a good idea that that's what you're going to be expecting. And I think there might have been some of that in play as well. So smart team, good team, deep lineup that you're going to have some trouble with. And I think we knew the Dodgers weren't going to go easy, Corey. This was their home ballpark. They needed a hold serve to keep their season alive. They did that. And now the Braves come home, still with the advantage, but back to their home ballpark, which I do think has a lot of value. And, of course, we'll get to that a little later.
Yeah, it speaks to how great Fried had been that we're absolutely stunned by what we saw Thursday night. Lasted 4 2/3 innings, got tagged for 5 runs. That was the highest total for Fried since July 5th. He gave up 2 home runs, the second time he's done that since June 12th. The Dodgers, I mean, they just hit him hard, and they did it consistently. He had an average exit velocity of 95.2 miles per hour, nearly 6 miles per hour more than his regular season average. When he faced the Dodgers in August, they averaged 93.6 against him. When they saw him in Game 1, they were over 90 miles an hour. I'm not trying to speculate on this or offer anything but a point of conversation. During the radio broadcast, they discussed whether Fried was tipping his pitches. The Dodgers had 10 hard hit balls tonight against him, topped by Chris Taylor at 112.3 miles per hour on his first home run. Fried was in the 92nd percentile during the regular season with a 34.3% hard hit rate. Tonight, it was 55%.
Yeah, and there was a huge adjustment right there. And that's when you know that you're not getting the Max Fried that we saw over the past really almost 3 months now. He had been dynamic, and he had done a great job of limiting hard hit contact. And one of the other things that's the hallmark of Max Fried, he picks up his strikeouts, a lot of ground balls, a lot of weak contact, and a lot of opportunity for the Braves defense to help him out. But that was not the case tonight. I do think that there's some credence to that. And, of course, we're not talking about something elaborate and crazy and over the top. The Dodgers are a smart team. And I think if they have seen somebody time and time again, and you have the opportunity to study these guys in between starts and look for things and figure it out. If you got a bunch of traffic on base, it doesn't hurt either, because you're having to go through series of signs and change indicators and do all kinds of things. I think the Dodgers just cracked the code, if you want to call it that. And once you've done that, it makes it, I think, a little bit easier to at least key in on the opportunity to ambush some pitches, and to hit some fastballs, or hit some pitches in general very hard against a guy that simply does not give up that kind of contact more times than not. So honestly, if you look at what happened with Max Fried there, that is kind of the story of the night. But if you're not going to score more than a couple of runs against the Dodgers bullpen, you were asking Fried to be pretty much perfect at this point, and this just wasn't a night that he could deliver that. But this game, it got out of hand, and then it never really seemed to have a balance or a course correction where the Braves were able to find some answers for the runs the Dodgers were putting up. And then, of course, they ran away with it at the end, tacked on a bunch of runs in the late frames, including the 8th inning. So just a disappointing night. But, I mean, we've talked about this over and over and over and over. You concentrate on winning the day. If you don't, you flush that one. You go to the next one. You concentrate on winning that one. And the Braves do have some things going for them as they come back home to Atlanta, get the day off, get a chance to forget about this. And we'll continue on with our discussions about what lays ahead in Game 6. But this is just one of those nights that you just have to forget.
Yeah, and it wasn't just Freed, by the way. I mean, we saw the bullpen get tagged a bunch. You mentioned the late runs there, and it wasn't the regulars that we've seen log so many
No.
meaningful innings in this. Chris Martin gives up a home run to Taylor. Dylan Lee gives up another one. Jacob Webb allows AJ Pollock's second home run in the ninth inning. The hurt stretched well beyond Freed. The Dodgers had 17 hits and 5 home runs tonight. Meanwhile, the Dodgers had their own bullpen game going, and it seemed the perfect recipe for the Braves to punch that ticket to the World Series, especially when Freddie Freeman got to Joe Kelly with a 2-run home run in the first. And then Kelly steps out after just 2/3 of an inning. Evan Phillips, the former Brave, comes in, strikes out Adam Duvall on one pitch. And, I saw Jason Stark tweet this. That may have been the first time in postseason history that somebody got a one-pitch strikeout. But he goes third scoreless. Then you have more scoreless innings from Alex Vesia, Bruce Gratterall, Blake Trinan, Corey Knebel, and finally Kenley Jansen. The Braves bullpen did its job in Game 4, Grant, and the Dodgers absolutely flipped that script in a big way in Game 5.
Yeah, it was like an echo, Game 4 to Game 5. I mean, you'd be forgiven for confusing one for the other because basically what changed was the line score for the two teams. Dodgers got a couple more runs late than the Braves got, but more or less, it felt kind of like the same sort of game. Urias got beat up in Game 4, Freed got beat up in Game 5, and now you just have to turn your attention to coming home. Atlanta is going to have the opportunity to host these games, which I think is huge, and see what you can do in your home ballpark where you've already had a couple of dramatic wins. I think, Corey, as we talked about the series going out to LA, and as we looked at this series overall, there's a little bit of something in our prediction that was, I think, just laying there waiting for us, and that's if you call Braves in 6, you have to be prepared to let Game 5 go. I'm prepared to let Game 5 go. I hope the Braves are. I hope Braves fans are. And I hope Game 6 is where they hit pay dirt and where they're able to put this series away.
Before we move ahead, though, I want to kind of get into amid those frustrations. I mean, they didn't get a runner past second base after the first inning, but Freddie Freeman smashed that 2-run home run. He's now gone deep in back-to-back games, has 6 hits in the last 3 games. Eddie Rosario just keeps delivering it. 2 more hits tonight, has a ridiculous 12 in this series and 20 at-bats. His OPS is north of 1,700 in this series and over 1,300 in the postseason overall. So the top of the lineup, just keeps absolutely delivering. And, obviously going to be a huge pitching matchup coming up in this next game, but you really have to like where those two guys in particular are at right now.
Yeah, those guys that look great. There were some signs from the Braves offense in that Game 4 win that maybe they were starting to turn some things on. It's not like Urias was not a tough customer all season long. He had been tough. The Braves hadn't really touched him up the way that they did in that game. They'd gotten to him for a couple of home runs here and there, but they really hadn't roughed him up the way that they did in Game 4. And now it's going to be interesting to see what Game 6 has in store, because we all remember in that Game 2 where Ian Anderson was done after 3 innings, the Dodgers hit him hard in the same way that they hit Max Fried hard. Anderson just wasn't around as long, didn't give up as many runs. But one of the, I think, one of the benefits of that short start is that he wasn't out there laboring. And then when he comes back around to face this club again, he's expended a whole bunch of energy in a start that just was not, was not his night, much like it was not Max Fried's night in the Game 5 loss. And you got Max Scherzer, who admitted that his arm is not feeling like he wants it to feel right now. So a couple of caveats when you look at that pitching matchup that could bode well for the Braves, in that Anderson has a chance to bounce back without overextending himself first time out. Meanwhile, it seemed like Max Scherzer pretty much had to empty the tank just to get into the 5th inning in that last start before Dave Roberts decided to pull him. And Scherzer, the ultimate competitor, was not second-guessing that choice. If anything, he was backing it up with the evidence that, I had to grind it through just to get into a position to maybe complete 5 innings.
Yeah, Anderson only went 55 pitches, and obviously, Brian Snitker said afterwards it just wasn't his night, and they were quick with the the hook on him, and this may be the benefit of that going into this game, is, as you mentioned, he wasn't overextended. But however you want to look at it, he gets Max Scherzer, who also should be rested, and it figures to be a tall order for Anderson and for the Braves offense. Grant, I don't think there's any way around this conversation. I mean, the Braves let the Dodgers off the hook because regardless of how you want to look at it, how they performed in this series, they still get Max Scherzer and Walker Buehler in line to go 6 and 7 should it go that far. And yes, the Braves counter with Ian Anderson, who has, a 1.35 career postseason ERA. You've got Charlie Morton, who we know the veteran pedigree and what he's done in this stage. But, last year, everyone watched a lead of 2-0 go to 2-1. They saw a 3-1 lead go to a 3-2. And then obviously we know how the series ended against the Dodgers last year. I'm not asking anybody to be talked off a ledge right now, Grant, but there are going to be Braves fans who are going to wonder whether or not they're watching history repeat itself.
There are comparisons, but I do think those two teams are in very different sorts. And the reason I say that is because this Braves team this year, it got some reinforcements. It was able to play its best baseball down the stretch. And I feel like they have, I don't want to say more momentum than last year's team had, but I think that it's as good or better. I think they're in a better position, honestly, in terms of the overall confidence level of this club heading into the playoffs. And I think that last year's experience kind of fed into that, because this is not uncharted territory now. We're not sitting here talking about, oh, the Braves finally won a postseason series. Yeah, that was true last year. They hadn't won a postseason series in way too long. This year, they come in off of that success. They're able to build off of that. The Dodgers are a tough team. We knew they weren't going to go easy into that good night. A game like Game 5, that's one it's a lot easier for me to forget about than what you saw in Game 3, where the Braves had them down on the mat, both shoulders squarely pinned. The referee's hand goes down once, twice, the third time, the Dodgers got their shoulder up. And the next thing you know, it's a crazy finish, and LA sneaks out of there with a win and manages to keep their hopes alive. That, to me, is the most pivotal game in the series right now. Of course, the Braves handled their business they needed to in Game 4. They answered having, that crazy, stunning victory that the Dodgers handed them 24 hours before. They were able to find the answer for that, but the Dodgers ultimately took 2 out of 3 at home. But I think when we talked about them going out to LA, and this is just kind of how I felt about it, take 1 of the 3 games there after getting the 2-0 lead. You did everything you could with a home field advantage. You're going to a place that you hadn't won, as we documented, in about 3.5 years, hadn't won a baseball game. You at least won a baseball game and brought this series home with a lead. There are a lot worse places to be. I'm not going to play therapist either right now and try to talk people off the ledge, because I know there's a nervousness, there's an anxiety, there's some tension that goes with all of this, just based on not just last year against this team and the echoes of that, but how far back the Braves postseason struggles go and how you like to define the Braves postseason struggles. And there are some things that echo through time, it seems like, in October with this club. But long story short, I'd much rather be there with a chance to go to the World Series, and the Braves are sitting there with a chance to go to the World Series. They simply need to finish the job, get it done, put this Dodgers team away, and await whoever's coming out of the American League, because that series has looked pretty nuts as well.
Yeah, and to stay in the wrestling world for just a second there, I mean, you could say this game, the Brooklyn Brawler comes out post Max Fried, and it's just jobber central for the rest of the night there, as they didn't use any of their big bullpen arms. So, certainly there wasn't any demoralizing stuff out of that way. And now you go to Truist Park, where the Braves are 4-0 in the postseason. They've not lost consecutive games since September 14th and 15th. Home field advantage has been massive in this series, and figure that to continue as the Braves look to build on this. And whether this series goes 1 more game or 2 more games, we're going to have you covered here on Battery Power. So if you haven't already, make sure you go to the Talking Chop YouTube channel, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get alerts every time we drop a new episode. He's Grant McAuley. I'm Cory McCartney. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in next time, Braves Country.